Okay, so the first question that people usually ask me, is why did I write a book after all I've had this interesting career? You can hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay. Are you going to sit near me all the time? No, I'm happy. I'll figure it out.
Okay.
I'll see how I can do it. How about in my teeth? Does it look funny if I... No, I would like to read you part of my book, which explains why would someone who has all these interesting... Well, first of all, why am I here? I'm here because Adam Birnbaum and Deborah Royce have this great theater. And I would like to support theaters like this because they support what matters, which are independent filmmakers. So thank you. So I've had this career, right? I started, docus were things like the CIA and what's wrong with this. And I noticed when I heard there was a job at HBO, this was 35 years ago. So I was once young, Adam. I heard about a job at HBO, and I loved a job. And it was in this area called documentaries. I knew nothing about documentaries. I wasn't allowed to have a television when I was little. So I had gone to Barnard, and then I went to the Yale Drama School and majored in directing, but there were no directing jobs in the 60s for women. And so I worked at different things in television. I worked on television, teaching English for USIA. But then someone mentioned this job at HBO, and it was 13 weeks, and I thought, what is cable? Well, I don't know. I'll try it. So I tried it, and I fell in love with this impossible mission, which was making real people, occasionally famous people, but mostly real, regular people, important to people who didn't know them. So if you would meet a little girl from Sichuan, your heart would go out to her. Or if you would meet Carrie and Debbie, you would see that they kid around just like you do with your daughter. So I went from down to up and up to down. Mostly I liked real people, ordinary people, and occasionally extraordinary people who, push the world or nudge the world, I should say, like Larry Kramer. So I've had this extraordinary career, and it's been really interesting. But I was always, I don't know why I'm admitting this to all of you, I don't even know you. Is there anyone here I know? I do? Really, where?
My dad, Richard Shapiro.
Oh.
And that's to your house.
I did? Oh my goodness. Do you mind if I talk just to her then? Because some of these stories are quite intimate. Is it all right if I talk? You do? Oh, I feel so at home now. Okay, so I'm going to try to do the impossible. Why did I write the book? Okay, let me tell you why I wrote the book. One, I've been working for 35 years. I've given my life to this job. And I thought I never talked about myself. I would be in an editing room worried about whether something was reading well, or whether the music was right, or whether the oil spill pigeon that couldn't lift his wings was going to get better and be able to fly. So I was always obsessing about things, and never, like Sheila would go to work, Sheila would work, Sheila would go home. She had a home? Where'd she go? So I decided to write something about what the other part of my life was like. I've had a facelift. I wanted to be young. Everyone I knew who had a facelift never talked about it. When women would talk about their age, they would say, don't tell anyone, I'm going to be 65. Or someone at work said to me, could I take off Friday? And I'd say, oh, what's the matter? She said, my mother's having hip replacement. And I'd say, oh, I'm so sorry. How old is she? 54. So, I thought, do they know me? Do they know my problems, my joys, my life? I'm going to write a book. So this is the book. Now I'm going to do the impossible. I'm going to put on glasses. I'm going to open the book. Can you hear me still? Okay, wait a second. Let's try this. Can you hear me now? Okay. Is this okay? All right. So I'm going to read you this last story of the book. And you don't have to buy this book. It would be nice if you did. But you don't make money on a book. you meet people you would never have met before, and you share stories no one ever asked you to share. But you feel a kind of camaraderie with, I would say, people of a certain age. You don't feel ashamed anymore of fighting back. So why did I write the book? I couldn't figure it out. Okay, this is the last story in the book, and you're getting it for free. It's called The Wrong Kind of Hot. Chock full of nuts was an old-time coffee shop with a great raisin cream cheese sandwich and coffee that was always the right kind of hot. Hardly the place for a game changer, and yet it happened for me to be one. My mother was born with an awful disease called Raynaud's. Most of the time, Raynaud's simply means you have a lack of circulation in your extremities. Annoying, yes, but nothing to be alarmed about. But my mom had a severe case, the kind where your fingers, your toes, and then even arms and legs would lose circulation and go from blue to black, and then become gangrenous. It's incredibly painful. If they turn black, they never heal, and then they die. And the only treatment is amputation. I grew up fearful of decay. A black nail would mean a finger above the knuckle was in danger and eventually would lead to an amputation. My mother's disease started ruthlessly with her fingers. First, it was the second fingertip on her left hand, and then over the years it progressed. Mount Sinai Hospital in New York was my second home. I knew all the nurses. I knew exactly how much was needed in every vending machine. I wanted sweet things. Life for me was sour, yet no raisinets, no jujubes, no almond joy could take away the bitter taste of life's brutal entrance fee. Mom, I would say, why do we live if we have to suffer? And my mom would say, oh, Sheila, what's the choice? And so it would be that I grew up sad and terrified, thinking every cold was terminal pneumonia, every small paper cut a future amputation. After all, I was my mother's daughter. My mother was very hard on me. I never seemed to do anything right. Pain disturbed any pleasure she might have had. Every event was fraught with the need for pain medication and my nursing skills. If I resisted this servitude, I would be blamed. She told me again and again that I was selfish. We didn't have money for help. My mother was sure angry living in this hell, and I was her closest driver in the river Styx. Sure, I had a sister, but she was 7.5 years younger, so of course I was her caretaker too. Sheila, do this. Sheila, do that. Sheila, you didn't do this. Sheila, you didn't do that. I loved my mother, but at the same time I resented her. While my friends' mothers shopped and worried about the color of their hair as it turned gray and their fire and ice matching lipstick and nail color, I lived in a private, war-torn universe. I lived with this noose around my neck, and so I became me. My father was never home. He worked at the post office, booked bets for the mailman, and spent his nights playing cards in what were known then as goulash joints on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. These were working middle-class clubs where men would play poker for cash and bet on horses and sporting events. They all smoked. My father smoked 3 packs a day. His nickname was Benny P.O. Hey, Benny, want to bet on the Knicks game? What are the odds? Who's your favorite? One day, when I was a sophomore living in a barn or dorm, commuting home frequently at my mother's beck and call, my mom came uptown for lunch. She was driving a newly equipped car with odd handbrakes that could be maneuvered with her elbow. She was proud of its adaptability, and she zoomed citywide, thanks to the Rusk Institute, the post office's medical plan, and Volvo mechanics. By that time, she had suffered an amputation of her left arm just below her elbow. And as ugly as the amputation was, it was a great improvement over the creeping crud of gangrene and the excruciating pain of a dying limb. In 1960, my mom was in her early 40s. That seemed very old to me. I was born when she was 22. She had come that day for lunch, wanting to go to Chock full of nuts, to get one of their famous raisin cream cheese sandwiches and the always just right coffee. She seemed happy, for once, to see me, happy to be mobile and driving by herself, happy to be ambulatory, though amputated. It was a sultry, too warm day in May. Her pleated dress had long sleeves, the one on the right arm rolled up, and the one on the left tied in a knot below the stump. Now, there must be a better word for stump, but frankly, why should you euphemize the ugly? The air conditioning in the restaurant was off. It was tolerable, but Mom was hot with the knotted sleeve. That amputated arm had ghost-like sweat that would often roll down and wet the inside, as if her stump was crying and trapped without air. Mom said her arm was stifling. I rolled up her left sleeve, untying the knot. I unbuttoned the second button of her dress and fanned her with my study notepad. "Any better?" I asked. "Not really," she said. Our sandwiches came and the perfect coffee. Hot on a hot day, but perfectly so. Mom rested her stump on the counter. Her shortened arm was heavy to lift and too short to hide below the counter. Suddenly, from the other side of the S-shaped counter, a middle-aged woman with a kinky perm bob and harlequin glasses who was fanning herself with a newspaper yelled out, "Please, ladies, I'm eating. It's rude to expose that arm. It makes me want to throw up." That's what she said. And that's what I remember she said. And every time we tell this story to close friends or sympathetic physical therapy folk, or just to each other, that's what my mom remembered too. I apologized to this bitch. It was odd for me. I wasn't the apologetic type. I was afraid to catch this woman's eye. I was afraid she would hurt me or make a bigger scene. Everybody in the restaurant listened. I rolled the sleeve down and tied the knot. I'm sorry, I said to her. I was embarrassed. Everything was going too fast. Customers started taking sides. The woman to our left said that the lady who spoke out was a crazy lady and she was disgusting. And yet, a man on the right said, after all, this is a place to eat and some things are not meant to be seen while eating. The two squabbled, these strangers. Mom and I hurriedly left the restaurant. The sandwiches were never going to be tasty again. The coffee was never going to be the right kind of hot. All was cold. I cried in the fixed-up car. Mom said the woman was crazy, maybe more than crazy. But I cried because I had not yelled back. I should have said, "Fuck you, this is my mom. She has a horrible, horrible disease that you are lucky enough not to have." I was furious that I had apologized. Why had I? Why was I ashamed? Why was I a beggar and not a victor? Why had I let this woman seize the moment? Why? People talk of moments that make you change, that determine who you are. This moment was mine. I would realize that I understood people and their suffering, and somewhere in defending their difference, there was a place for me. I had failed once, and I wouldn't fail again. So I would grow to champion stories about those less fortunate, stories of real people. Mostly, I chose to tell stories of the struggle to triumph in this uncertain and often cruel world. I've always been interested in those who need visibility, notoriety, and acceptance, anonymous victims of unfairness, deprivation, and poverty. I guess I was determined to right my ineffectiveness at that lunch counter so long ago. Documentaries talked back when I had been unable. They speak without shyness, never apologizing, blatant, truth, ugly at times, but always true. So 2 leftover cups of coffee and raisin bread with cream cheese had lost their taste forever, chock full of nuts, the wrong kind of hot. I'm wearing the kind of lipstick that your hair sticks to, so if you don't ever wear that if you have to get up in front of a lot of people. Oh, I'm wearing the kind of lipstick that makes your hair stick to your lips while you're trying to read. And it makes your nose itch, but I did fine. Didn't I? Okay. So now that I've made you feel so badly, I'm going to make you happy. I'm going to read you a story of my facelift. Can you tell that I had a facelift? Say yes, please. Oh, okay. All right. So here we go. This is true. These stories are all pretty true. Not all are about me. Some are about a little bit of me, but this one is true. Okay. You try reading, scratching your nose, and holding a mic at the same time. Facing facelifts. Dr. Baker, I said, I look awful. He looked at me with a tragic smile and said, fear not. We can do a lift. You'll be just fine. I'm 56, I said. By the way, this was a way back. I'm 56, I said. And I think it's about time, don't you? He put his arm around me and said sorrowfully, it's time. Dr. Baker, is there anything less invasive than a lift? I had heard about some nip-and-tucky kind of thing. We'll fix you up, darling. Don't worry, he said. You look 7 years younger. And how long will that new me last, I asked. Some 7 years, he said. He gave me a mirror, a hand mirror, under the brightest of fluorescent lights. It said magnifier ×8. I looked in, I got dizzy, and I started to gasp. Clearly, there was no way out. In the mirror, I saw a wrinkled, witch-like, scrunched up, squashed face. Me. The mirror spoke to me menacingly, whispering in my ear. It said, without any doubt, you are not the fairest of them all. You are not fair at all. I told my husband and my son about my upcoming operation. Each extolled my present beauty and assured me of my imminent death by surgery. You're ridiculous, my son said. You look like Michael Jackson. My husband said, you look fine just the way you are. Okay, I said to them both. I'm beautiful enough for you, but I'm not young enough. Maybe I'm young enough, but I'm not young enough for the rest of the world. Then while waiting for this miracle, my Barnard College 40th reunion arrived. I opened the door marked with my graduation year. Old ladies glared at me through thick glasses. I closed the door quickly. This must be the wrong room, I thought. Hadn't they heard of contacts? Old ladies with advanced degrees and high IQs? Barnard College was a place where brains were supposed to be more important than beauty. I pretended that was true, but I never bought into that philosophy. I opened the door again and walked bravely into the room. Oh my God, said an elderly classmate. You look exactly the same as when we graduated. You do too, I lied. That old lady was me as well, and we were lying to each other. The day came. After a sleepless night, my superficial self arrived at Dr. Baker's office at 5 a.m. In addition to being fearful of the anesthesia and ultimately of my death, I was betraying my liberal, earnest 60s self. Could this artificial mannequin be me? Could this still be the Woodstock, March on Washington, anti-apartheid liberal? Could I be this deceptive liar, lying to taxi drivers and trying to keep 7 years at bay? What happened to the honor system? I moved on to the gurney. I was then prepped by an annoying nurse who gave me enough Valium that I would have allowed the Boston Strangler to do the operation. I had given my life to my vanity. Here I was, brainless, vain, terrified. The last thing I remember is being too drowsy to run away. What kind of woman would do this to herself anyway? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. I awoke several hours later, seemingly alive, with a helmet wrapped around my head and swollen eyes, and immediately puked. I was given apple juice in a paper cup, a saltine cracker, and the mean nurse who would take me home. It was a package deal. She was 24 hours inclusive. Nurse Ratchet eyed me with clear resentment. She was older even than I, and looked at me as if I was a foolish and frivolous female. Ratchet clearly had done this many times before, and she did not approve of rich bitches who lie. She coldly washed the dry blood from around my eyes. Blasé, she had seen it all. She was disdainful. She knew how shallow I was. We spoke little, and soon as the shift was up, she left me alone with my face. This new face was black and blue. These new eyes were swollen. The punishment was severe. I had earned this suffering, and I've even spent big money on it. I informed the office that I was on vacation. Where, they said. Hades, I answered. And they laughed. And so it came to pass that the turban was taken off, the staples removed, stitches pulled, blood gone, the face refreshed at a price too dear to explain. Now, did I look better? I guess so. I returned from this vacation, not with a tan, but with yellow and light blue streaks, and anyway, those who didn't know the truth knew I was a workaholic. So where had I been? And so I made an announcement. Guys, I had a facelift. No one was surprised. I went public in and out of every office on my floor. The responses predictably came out as follows. Oh, you didn't need it. You were and are so beautiful. You look 10 years younger. You can count on these. But with this feeling and this extra sense of nothingness came this inexplicable sense of why not try more? Why not try to please this spiteful ×8 magnifying mirror? Why not be consistently dissatisfied with my appearance and other age-old parts? Every wrinkle would obsess me. I looked at myself 10 times a day. I was known to bend down over to peek into a side view mirror of a stranger's car. It seemed to me that one side of my face looked younger than the other. And so I finally understood the aging Hollywood star who said, "This is my profile shot, dear. Left side only." But the truth came in the pudding one Friday. A temporary assistant named Violette, who of course had purple punk hair to match her name, and tattoos and string bracelets, all signifying some revolutionary cause, was assigned to me. It wasn't until the end of the day that I noticed she had a gold ring in her lip. This tribal assistant, 20 years old, was also into alteration, which to me signified that we had something precious in common. "Violette," I said, "you did a great job today, and I'm sorry I worked you so hard. What do you usually do?" I asked. She said she was in her last year of college and that she hoped to devote her life to saving species whose extinction would herald the end of the universe. Fish were dying, amphibians, plants, The streams were getting too warm. The planet was belly up. You know, I said to her, I was part of the March on Washington in 1963. I made some of the posters. Oh, she said, thinking possibly I was involved in Lincoln's assassination. We chatted about birds and plants and fish in danger. I told her that I knew that fish were low in calories. Violette was vested in the future. You're an honest kid, I said. You tell it like it is. How old, Violette, do you think I am? She thought, unfazed. You remind me of my mother. I don't know, 60? Close enough, I said, devastated. I had been 57 that very week. So then who was I fooling, really? The taxi driver knew I was not with child, and the child knew, even with my new face, that I was like her mother. Violette, I said, would you ever have a facelift? Twirling her lip ring with her tongue, she thought and said, by the time I'm as old as you, there probably won't even be a planet. Do you feel good about yourself, I asked. Yes, she said, because I feel badly for the world, and that helps me feel good about myself. I guess so, I said. She was selfless, and I was selfish. Violette packed up to leave and went off to save the world. I rouged and powdered my face with a little more passion than usual. Now, did I feel better, pulled and stretched and numb? Yes and no. Yes, for the camouflage of losing make-believe time. And no, because who was I fooling, really? And yet, disturbingly, before I left the office, I called my dermatologist, Dr. Green. I need some refreshment, I said to the nurse. Botox or whatever else she has. Anything new? I think I have like a crevice on the right side of my lip. Let me see if Dr. Green can take you. Hold on, she said. Then, Dr. Green's got something really new for you. She'd like you to try it. Can you come right over? Yes, I can be there in 20. If I can get a cab, the doctor will wait. And so I jumped into a cab. It jolted and jerked. I didn't even pretend a pregnancy. I told the driver I had a bad back. He asked me what I did for a living. Once upon a time, they asked me if I was an actress. Exhausted, I said, I'm in real estate. He looked in the mirror. I thought you were an actress, he said. It was worth it, I thought. Look who I fooled. I imagine all the beauties he thought I might have liked. And then he said, I know who you are. You're Judge Judy. I gulped. You really are Judge Judy, aren't you? He insisted. I'm not, I said. You are. No, really, driver, I'm not. All right, he said, but I know the truth. He smiled knowingly. The verdict was out. I was fooling nobody. I looked like Judge Judy. So did I feel better about myself? Well, I was alive. But the bottom line was that I heard a metronome ticking in my head that I had never heard before. Maybe Dr. Baker had implanted it. And maybe Dr. Green had wound it up. Or maybe I was just plain crazy. Time. I rushed into the dermatologist's office. I couldn't wait for the new fix. I would try it. No matter how much it cost, no matter how much it hurt, fooling no one. Okay, that's my story. Okay, so you have all of me here. I mean, you have the sorrow, the fun, the sadness. Do you want to ask a question? Someone's leaving already. You're just going to the bathroom? Okay. I take things very personally. Okay, a question. Okay.
Here you go, right here.
Hi.
My dear.
Oh, thank you. It's an ordinary question about the book versus the CDs. Are the CDs abridged?
No.
No.
The CDs were an interesting experience. Are you a plant from the publisher?
No.
Are you a real person?
No, but I heard
Yes?
I
It's
heard
because that's a
excerpts.
really expensive question. Okay, so this is what happened. I wrote this book, and one day, and I wrote a poem for Larry Kramer, and it was his 80th birthday, and Christian Baranski came to his party. And I was a little shy about reading a poem, which is in here, to Larry, whom I absolutely love, and who I'd done a documentary about, who I'd learned to love, because he had the courage I could never have had. And I said, Christine, would you read this poem to Larry? Because I thought she could read it much better than I could. And she said, let me see it. So I gave it to her, and she read it. And it was good. I thought it was good. And Larry went like this, and I bent down, and he kissed me. And I thought, that's it. I'll write the stories. I'd written some of them by then. But I'll call people that scare the shit out of me and ask them to read it on the CD. And so that then began a kind of a chutzpah process that I had used for other films. Like, Mr. Mayor, will you let us into the, broken village in Szechuan? Can we show you with your limb off? Can we have you take them off when you're interviewed by Jim? All these things that I had pushed, I thought I would push for me. So I started calling people that I admired or that I had met, Meryl Streep, Gloria Vanderbilt, Gloria Steinem, who else is in it? I mean, everybody that I was afraid of. I mean, I just called them, or I sent them emails. And the Gloria Vanderbilt one was funny because I had done a documentary with her, and I loved her dearly. And I didn't want her to read about a dead child, what it's like to experience a dead child, because I thought that was not correct. But I sent her the galley of the book. And she called me. She actually was in my psychiatrist's office, and the phone kept and I thought, because of my background, someone had died. It was and I said, Dr. Marco, I have to take this call. So I went in the other room expecting the worst, and it was Gloria. And she said, darling, I love your book. I said, thank you, Gloria. She said, I want to read the one about adultery. Now, she's 93 years old. I mean, I guess anything can happen to anybody at any time. I mean, I did climb up this thing. But I think this was a shocker. And I said, Gloria, why? Why would you choose that one? And she said, because I know a lot about it. So Gloria read that. But there were other women who I had interesting things. Christine, you know about. Kathy Bates, I just called her. I knew someone who knew her. Ellen Burstyn grew to be a friend. I met her at a screening, and I was wearing a jacket that she liked. She gave me her code or something. It was like a secret email. So I said, hey, how about? And she said, sure. RuPaul, I let him read one about the Grim Reaper. I had worked with RuPaul years before. I mean, that was gutsy. Glenn Close was in Glasgow, and I thought, Glasgow, I'll learn how to Skype. So I sent her a letter. She said, sure. She read one about a dog dying, and also about a woman who puts her foot in the mouth, says the wrong things all the time. She was great. Edie Falco, I called. Tova Felcher, I called. Whoopi, I went through a lot of things to get Whoopi. Gail King I called, Judith Light, it was tough, but then I grew to love her. Audra McDonald, Rosie O'Donnell called, Liz Smith, Leslie Stahl, Martha Stewart, Marlo Thomas, Lily Tomlin, Diane von Furstenberg. I mean, honestly, when each of these people came to record, I thought, damn it, Sheila, you're good. You got this person. You didn't have to pay them. You didn't go through their agent, because you never can go through an agent. And they're doing it for you, so you must have done something right. And when the last person read on the very last day, and the book was finished, I thought, what had I done? I think I had done it really for me, because the publisher wasn't interested, because those kind of CDs, is this the kind of answer you wanted? I mean, Jesus, you must be exhausted from this answer. Are you okay? Did you really want to know that? I still think you're a plant. I mean, you're nice, but I think you're a plant. Okay, any other questions?
Got one right here. Right behind.
I can't see that far.
Do you want
Is that a human? Yes.
Hi, Sheila.
Hi.
So thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
I love the stories that you were sharing in your book, and also...
Are you a plant too?
No, but I spoke with you just before this evening, and it was a pleasure speaking with you
Oh,
outside.
I remember you.
Yes.
Perry?
Lori.
Well, I was close.
So the question I have for you is, in regards to the stories that you choose to do the documentaries on, I like the reason that you said that you were doing it, because you wanted to give a voice to those that maybe didn't have a voice for themselves. And it seems like there's so many fantastic stories to tell. I mean, I'm sure even just based on yesterday and what happened in Vegas, there's going to be some incredible stories to tell of heroism that comes out of that. And I'm just curious how you select those stories that you decide to put on screen, because there's just so many. The ones that you shared tonight were unbelievable. So I just wanted to hear a little bit more about that.
I think it's always a little different. I think it has to do with falling in love. Your heart skips a beat, and I'm very competitive, so I have to look at the vista of what other networks might be doing. So I say, oh, that's good, but then I have to make sure it isn't everywhere. You know, it's hard to say. You know, I like to hear people talking. I like to hear what they have to say. And in what they say, something usually sparks. You know, I'll give you an example. The Second World War, at the end of the Second World War, my boss said to me, we have to do something about the Second World War. And I thought, oh, I got to do stock footage. I have to do the Second World War. You know, it was the 50th anniversary of World War II. And my family, my husband, my son, and I had gone to the Holocaust Museum in Washington. And on the wall there were people, you know, projected interviews that they had done with survivors. And one of the interviews was with a woman who had been on a death mark named Gerda Weissman Klein. Incredibly interesting, maybe a 3-minute interview. And then about 5 cuts later, there was the soldier who had saved her. He was an American, a German American, who had actually saved her after this terrible death march. She weighed like 50 pounds. He married her. And then it went to the next person. And when I got back to New York, I said to my boss then, I said, Michael, I've had many bosses. I said, Michael, I think we should do, the networks are going to do the war, or the generals, or the big battles. Why don't we do One Survivor Remembers? And that's what we did. So we did a film called One Survivor Remembers, and it won the Academy Award. And I was, you know, so how do you get that idea? I don't know. You just think of something that might be a little different, and then you go with it. And if you're lucky enough to kind of have a boss at that time who says, I trust you, you do it. I mean, it's not cheap to make a film, and as the competition gets more and more intense, it gets harder and harder. But does that answer your question? Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, thank you. You've covered so many subjects and you've done so many wonderful things about the world. So what is out there that you haven't done that you would like to do?
I'd like to figure out hate, and I don't know how. I'd like to be able to know if man is more full of hate or more full of love. I'd like to know in some strange way about that man in Las Vegas. What made him so brutally cruel? You know, what makes kids join ISIS? I mean, and then he confuses me because he has money. This man was not poor. He was not disenfranchised. To go up to the 20-something floor and shoot with an automatic rifle, what is that? Is that human? I often imagine, you know, if I could meet Darwin, because I don't know that I would do well with God. I think if I could say to him, you know, what have we evolved to? If it's evolution, is this the new human? One in which evil overtakes good? I always remember Anne Frank when, or I don't know if it's true or not, but it's the last line of her book, which is, I believe people are still good. It seems to me today, you question that. You just say to yourself, are they really still good? Or do we make them good? Is there something evil that has to be expunged by society and by, I don't know the answer. But if I could make one big film about evil and how to understand, I can't understand it. I don't understand killing a child. I don't understand Syria. I mean, I understand the politics of Syria, but I don't understand killing a child. I can't do it. So if I could make it, I would know how. But I'm searching. If you have any ideas, let me know. Okay, that was not a plant.
No.
I don't know the answer. Anything else?
Okay.
Got somebody over there.
I can't see back
Sorry.
there.
Do you also have a microphone? No, I didn't know if I was talking over someone else. But I think as a survivor of homicide since 1993, to me, what you could do is illustrate the struggle that survivors go through, whether they're individuals or they're, you know, Sandy Hook or they're Las Vegas or they're Orlando. And so much of the media gives attention to the shooter
That's true.
and trying to diagnose how this person came to be.
Right.
When the post-trauma stress disorder and the survivor guilt and everything that the individuals and the families go through, it's not foreign. It's not something that's just come here through ISIS or mass shootings. It's been here for a long time.
Yeah.
And for me personally, I don't think there's very much experimental or informational documentation of what the survivors go through. It's more about, you know, as you said, it's important to understand where mental illness comes from and why would somebody do something like this. But through your documentaries, you shed so much information and so much light on things that people wouldn't normally touch because it's not part of their lives. So when they see a documentary that resonates with them, it's an educational process because it doesn't necessarily affect them directly. So to me, it would be so much more beneficial if there was something that we could look at and relate to, even if it wasn't just personally affecting us.
You're talking about empathy and compassion for survivors?
For
God knows
survivors of
I've done a
homicide,
lot of
absolutely. And
those. Are you an HBO subscriber?
No, but I'm a survivor of homicide.
But there, we have done, I will, when we won't bore everybody, but I will at the end get your name and I'll send you a bunch of survivor
Well, that would be
documentaries.
great.
Yeah.
But I think you would be somebody, because you're in the, you know, you have a huge history and.
I have a huge history.
No, but you have a lot of followings and you've done a lot of remarkable things. So if someone, you know, you're the female equivalent of Michael Moore, except you're not offensive.
Am I that fat?
No, that's even more important.
Michael would not be happy to hear that.
No, but it's you can reach people.
But do you think Michael reaches people? If you go to see Michael's show, it's like to like. It's a great show, but he's not talking to the enemy. So the point really is, who are you talking to? If you're talking to yourself or selves like yourself, are you really communicating a new message? I don't know the answer. But I will give you, we spent a lot of time with survivors, and it's heartbreaking. And I'm glad you survived. Did you survive?
I did.
Good for you. What was it?
Thank you. My dad was murdered in Greenwich in 1993. And honestly, not much has changed.
You mean nothing has changed in the town, or nothing has changed in empathy?
Empathy, in education, in knowledge of post-trauma stress disorder. We focus so much as a media on the shooter.
Well, this is a little off target, but I will send you a bunch of stuff because we spent a lot of time on that. But in a live day, which of course you can't explain here, is something the military explains to soldiers who have lost their legs and arms or who are quadriplegic or whatever, to celebrate. You celebrate your birthday, and then you celebrate your alive day, which is the day you survived death. And when we did this film with Gandolfini, one of the great teddy bears of life and the great talents, when we did it, what was so interesting was there wasn't an amputee anywhere who celebrated his alive day, because he had lost his life in many ways. And that's what that show was really about. Of the 7 men and 1 woman in there, 2 have committed suicide since then.
Wow.
So sorrow is present, and survival is what we all have to do.
I am Perry. Hi.
Oh, you're the Perry.
Perry,
you really moved me. You were so nice.
Well, I read your
I met Perry outside, and she said something so nice that it made me cry. Don't say it again, Perry.
I read your books a while ago when it came out, and one of the stories that really stayed with me, and this is off the top of my head because I really read this a long time ago, but you write about, I think it's one of your girlfriends who did tough love.
Yes.
And I'm wondering your feeling about that, and what was her reaction to
I made
your
that story up.
Did you?
Okay, but it was based on a lot of experience. So many of my friends and so many of you have children who do drugs. And the prevailing philosophy of many of my friends was, don't be complicit in any way. Don't be a, what's the word they use? I can't remember the word. An enabler. The kid has to hit rock bottom. So, although I made the story up, it was based on a lot of truths, mine and friends' truths, which is, it's a choice. You kick your kid out, as this woman does in that story, and she gets a call from a policeman that says, Mrs. O'Reilly, and she says, yes. And he says, I'm calling about your son. And she says, yes. And the next line is she's at the funeral with someone holding her. If you kick your kid out, you face the penalties of the rock bottom curse. But I don't know the answer. At some point, I feel personally that drugs are an illness, and that I'm not a doctor, I don't really know. But I think you can never kick your kid out. I think even if you have to lose your life, it's your job. And, to get that call is probably the worst thing anyone can ever get. I'm not sure what rock bottom is. In this particular story, rock bottom is a cemetery. He hit rock bottom. I'm not sure that was what was meant. But in my experience going to any kind of these meetings, which help so many people, that expression of letting a kid hit rock bottom is prevailing and often, I don't know, tragic. But I don't know the answer. I don't know the ratio of saving to losing. But I know you can't say goodbye. You just can't, because you might be saying goodbye forever. This woman in the story has a child who has epilepsy, and she treats that child with medication for her epilepsy, and the kid is valedictorian of her class, she has a boyfriend, and she has fewer and fewer seizures. Her son is a drug addict, and she doesn't know how to treat him. He's driving her crazy. He's taking money out of her purse. He's buying drugs. And she kicks him out. She says, "Go, Jeremy." And Ellen Burstyn reads that story on the CD. And, you know, in a strange way, I think we bonded over the story because she read it, and the audio engineer started to cry. I think I told you that, Sydney. I think he started to sob, like, you know, he's like a professional audio guy, and he goes, and she starts to cry. And I'm thinking, you know, does she have this story? Does he have that story? We never really discussed it. But the bottom line was we all had that story, or the fear of that story. I don't know. Nothing's worse than losing a child. Nothing. Think of all those people in Las Vegas. I'll get too upset. Okay, next. Is it a happy question? You want to know who did my facelift?
I don't.
You don't know his first name, no? Yes. Wait, you need them.
What does an executive producer do?
Give up their life. Not smell the roses, leave dirty dishes, have a good husband who lets you work late, sends out for junk food, and cares a lot. I mean, this executive producer. I can't answer for other ones. Maybe some just put money in it. I didn't do that. I put heart, and I pay the price. Anyway. Is that a good answer? Myself.
I have a question.
I'll tell you later. Do you want all my secrets in front of 10,000 people I don't know? I did pay a price. People are leaving. They're drifting out. Just the idea that they thought I'd ask them for money for my price. Okay, one more.
I have a question.
Okay.
Maybe this, I don't mean this in a nasty way at all.
You probably do, and I can take it.
No.
Well, then how else could you mean it if you prefaced it that way?
No, I'm just curious. Over the years in your work,
Right.
have you had any failures, and how did
Many.
and how did you handle them, or how did that affect
Why do you
your
think that
career?
would be a nasty question?
Well, I don't want to imply that you've had failures, but
Is there anyone that hasn't had failures? This is my motto. If you're right more than you're wrong, you're in the right job. If you're wrong more than you're right, you're in the... Wait. If you're right more than you're right, if you're wrong more than you're right, you're in the wrong job. I'm right more than I'm wrong, but I'm wrong a lot. Why, did you propose something I turned down that then one can...
no. No, I just wanted to know.
Not
what
nasty.
impact it
That's
had.
not nasty. That's a great question.
Okay.
Nobody's perfect. I mean, you know, I fuck up a lot. Yes. I did it. Nobody has a question.